Andy Strickland reporting earlier today that Logan Stanley's asked for a trade from the Winnipeg Jets. What do you make of that, Ken? And what are the chances that Stanley is still a Jet come Saturday?
I mean, good reporting by Andy. I think this is something that Elliot has, Friedman, my colleague, has also mentioned. Maybe in the summertime, he thought there might have been, some certain times over the year where Logan has been a little bit frustrated with maybe how things haven't progressed as much as possible for him. Obviously, we know that, in a lot of ways, I would say that because of the injuries that left the door open, Dylan Sandberg, I think, has passed Logan Stanley for the majority of time on the Jets depth chart. But I mean, this doesn't resonate with me, to be honest. And that's no offense, but we've heard players that have been asked before. I mean, if there's a deal to be made for Logan Stanley, they'll make it. I don't see the player being in a position for demand, nor do I see the team in a position where A, they need to move him, or B, they would be at the situation where they would be, kind of at the end of the development rope with him. I don't think things have progressed the way either the team or the player have maybe had hoped. But I don't see this being Logan Stanley is not a front burner issue for the Winnipeg Jets, is how I would put it, Huss. And I don't mean that to sound negative towards Logan, but their issues run deeper than trying to find a home for someone who may or not be unhappy with his ice time. So if Stanley is involved as a sweetener, or if he maybe, we've been talking, there's been a lot of talk about the Arizona Coyotes not wanting a lot of high salaried players, and their latest move being bringing in the contract of Jacob Voracek, which it looks like it will be paid by insurance, and getting to the floor. I would say that there's a possibility that Logan Stanley could be involved in a trade with a team like the Arizona Coyotes, where there could be more opportunity on the back end. But I mean, the Jets need to worry first about, bolstering their middle six and then upgrading their defense. And if that means including Logan Stanley in a package, or maybe that package is available so that they can open the door for one of their players who's knocking on the door with the Moose, by all means. But I don't think the Jets' priority list shifted, whether there was an ask or not. And I'm not questioning the reporting. Like I said, I think that this is something that maybe Logan had asked for previously as well. So, because Andy is a great reporter, so I'm not saying, I definitely think it could have happened. But Huss, I mean, I just like Logan Stanley is right now fighting to get into the lineup on a team that is looking to upgrade. So,
well, he's a depth defenseman. He's huge. He hasn't been very good. He's been passed on the depth chart. But the reason why I go, well, obviously the reason we bring it up is that Andy reported this today, and it seems topical. But I will say, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. I mean, when I look at Logan Stanley and the type of player that he is, he's huge. He's a depth defenseman that comes with some real size, and you would like to see him play maybe with a little more bite than he has overall. Isn't right now at the deadline the time when a player like that might have the most value if you are going to move on from him?
Well, it depends who's interested, Huss. I mean, do you see a contender making a move on Logan Stanley? No, it would be a team that's out of it, right? A team that thinks that he could play more for them and maybe grow into a different role. This is super interesting to me.
He might not necessarily play, but I mean, all these teams, I mean, we hear about, you need to have 10 defensemen to win the cup. I mean, if I am going to be making a run and think that this guy can play if need be, he might be a fine 7th or 8th defenseman for a team that think they might need him in a particular spot on a long playoff run.
Sure, but I mean, where's the evidence that would tell you that? And secondly, Huss, if that's the case, why the Jets still see themselves as a buyer? Why would they be selling an asset? I mean, I don't think that you'd be selling high on Logan Stanley right now. So I just don't know that. And again, the reason why I say it doesn't move the needle for me is because there has been a long laundry list of players who have expressed some discontent, and almost none of them had been moved immediately. And I don't see Logan being in a position of strength to be demanded to be moved out of town immediately. I mean, we've seen him around the rink. I mean, he's not a guy who's hanging his head a lot. I don't think he's a guy that would be a disruptor. It's not like someone you have to get out of the room immediately or it's not going to work. But, it's hard. We're just speculating here, right? If the report had come out half an hour a bit earlier, then there would have been a crowd around Logan Stanley's locker saying, "What can you tell us about this, Logan?" But I just don't see it as an untenable situation. And Huss, I'm sorry, I just don't see a team that is, let's say the team higher in the standings, unless their only option is to add a $900,000 player. I don't think that Logan Stanley would be at the top of many lists based on, like I said, he is what he has always been. He is a project player, and if you're a team taking him on, you're taking him on because you feel like you have the room to allow him to grow.
Is he still a project, or is he just is what he is?
I mean, it's a fair question. I just would say this, Huss. I mean, he still has had, like, just based on the number of NHL games played and the number of games missed, I think you still have to include him in the project role. I mean, he hasn't established himself as a full-time. He is a full-time NHLer, sorry, but he is not a top 6 full-time NHLer because currently he is in a battle with the likes of Dylan Sandberg and Kyle Capobianco to be in the lineup when he's been healthy. And now it's unfortunate for Logan because I think there were a couple of stretches where he actually played some okay hockey, but then he got hurt right away. So I can understand why there would be frustration. I mean, but to me, this is no different than, there's no different than Jack Roslovic expressing frustration for not being higher than a third line player for the majority of his time with the Winnipeg Jets. And I would say that in a lot of ways, Jack Roslovic was more of a high profile player, even though Logan was taken 18th and Jack was taken 25th. I would say that Jack is the more high profile player coming out of he was more of a higher kind of highly touted prospect or more finished prospect based on, his time with the U.S. National Development Program and everything else. So I think it's super interesting, Huss, but I think it's interesting because we've had so little to talk about. That something like that would be an eyebrow raiser. But again, like first line players have demanded to be traded by the Jets before, and they don't just say, oh, you don't want to be here? Oh, sure. Let me try to help you. I mean, I'm not saying they wouldn't try to help Logan Stanley, but as I've written and as you've talked about with many other people, the Jets they have an obligation to improve their roster. Like just handing over Logan Stanley, if there is a bidder, whether that's a contender or a team that's out of it and would like to see what they have in Logan Stanley. Like I said, to me, that's not a top priority or front burner item. If it gets done before 2 p.m., would I be surprised? No. But I don't see that. I think the Jets have far greater concerns or, pieces they would like to acquire before, crossing that off the list of their things to do, if it's even on their list of things to do to begin with, us, because we've got to remember the other side of this. And the part about Andy's report that often gets glossed out, and I'm not saying by you, Andy also made it clear, doesn't mean he will be on the move or that the team will make the move. So we know what the Jets feel about Logan Stanley, and I've seen us. We've not only
what
not
do they
seen
feel
any,
about
not,
him? They feel like he's not good enough to play in their top 6.
Well, Huss, but we've also seen every time he's been healthy, he's been put into the lineup. So they haven't given up on him. Otherwise, they'd be playing Kyle Capobianco ahead of him. So right now, Logan Stanley is not playing as much as Dylan Sandberg. But, I mean, every time we've seen them have whenever the door is open to Logan Stanley, they've moved mountains to get him into the lineup because of their feelings towards him as a penalty killer. So this is something I understand. Like, 2016 is a long time ago, Huss. I know exactly where you're coming from. This guy is going to be, I think, 25 years old this year. So do they have a better idea of what he is? Sure. But, I mean, there's still some runway for Logan. Like, Logan Stanley's not over the hill. If suddenly he gets rid of the injury issues and gets back to using his feet, maybe becomes a little bit more of an aggressive player. I mean, like the player we saw in Nashville who went into the lineup, drilled Cody Glass, then got into a fight immediately with Alexander Carrier, I think it was. I mean, do you need to see more of that if you're the Winnipeg Jets and you still have designs or plans for him? Of course, you got to see more, but I just don't see this as being at the end of the road here for the two sides. Is it possible that a move is made if someone shows an interest? Of course. Could he be a sweetener? Of course. But I don't think that suddenly we should say because of a tweet that this is all of a sudden something that the Jets are going to snap their fingers and say, you know what we need to do? Get rid of Logan Stanley. I mean, Huss, we've seen the evidence. They protected him over Dylan DeMello. So
yeah, but I mean, like Elliott's also mentioned that Stanley's name has been brought up.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't think that like
sure.
This is not breaking news. Like all of a sudden,
No.
I think he's expendable. I think this might, if they are at the point where, listen, we've gone through this, it hasn't worked out. He's not really in our plans to be, a guy that's going to be playing very much for us. If we move on him right now, is now the time where we might get the best return for a player like that. And I'm sure this is something that they have considered.
Sure. And again, like Elliot also mentioned that he was surprised he wasn't involved in the deal with Niederreiter. So, I mean, if you're Nashville, Huss, I mean, if you're Nashville and you just got rid of Ekholm, you are also lacking size on the back end. So, I mean, would they circle back on somebody else? I mean, I thought maybe Granlund might be someone that would interest the Jets. So, I mean, could a team come in and say, yes, we see some of the qualities in Logan Stanley that would fit here? Of course. We've talked about this a couple of times in the show, and I finally had a chance to ask Rick Bowness about it. And I even asked Jamie Alexiak about it when he was here with the Seattle Kraken. So he left Dallas, went to Pittsburgh, and then they had to bring him back because then he became that well-rounded player that they always thought that they had when they drafted him in the first round. So again, I'm not saying this is a distinct parallel, but there is a parallel there. And Huss, there's always the other part too. There's always the risk element involved when it comes to players like Logan Stanley, who are viewed as project players. Because the second they go out the door and they do something with somebody else, now all the same people that are yelling and saying they should have traded him 3 years ago are saying, how in the world could you trade a 6'7" guy that's suddenly a third pairing defenseman and fights and hits and does everything that appears to be lacking at times on the back end? But Huss, I totally get it. I mean, a lot of people are frustrated. Their patience level is running thin. And now it sounds like the players' patience level is also running thin.